desert, a young cowboy named Samuel Thompson heard the terrified screams of three Apache women being hunted by ruthless warriors. Without thinking about his own life, he rode straight into danger to save complete strangers. He believed it would be just another forgotten moment in the wild frontier. But 10 years later, those same women would return to his lonely ranch with a confession so unexpected, it would change his life forever. Please subscribe to my channel. Watch the next video as soon as possible. DC burning sun beat down relentlessly on the red rocks of the canyon. Samuel Thompson, a young cowboy of only 23, was guiding his horse along the dusty trail when he heard the screams. They weren't screams of joy. They were screams of pure terror. His heart began to beat faster. Samuel stopped his horse and pricked up his ears. The screams were coming from the other side of the rocky hill. Without a second thought, he spurred his mount and galloped toward the sound. What he saw when he reached the top made his blood run cold. 3 Apache women were running desperately across the valley. Behind them, a dozen Comanche warriors were riding at full speed, yelling war cries that echoed among the rocks. Samuel knew this story all too well. The enemy tribes had been in conflict for years, and these women were being hunted like prey. If the Comanches caught them, they would take them as hostages to harm the Apache tribe, or worse, leave them abandoned in unfamiliar territory to die alone. Samuel didn't think. There was no time for elaborate plans. There was only time to act. He rode down the hill at a full gallop, straight toward the women. Dust flew behind him like a golden cloud. The 3 women saw him approaching, and for a moment the fear in their eyes intensified. Another attacker, but Samuel raised his hand in a sign of peace as he shouted in the little Apache he knew. "Friends, help, get on." The tallest of the women, with jet black hair braided with turquoise beads, understood first. She shouted something to the other 2 in their language. Samuel stopped his horse next to them. There was no time for introductions. The first woman jumped on behind him with surprising agility. The other 2 ran toward them. The Comanche warriors were less than 100 mev away. "The tall rocks," Samuel shouted, pointing east. "Run there." The 2 remaining women nodded and began running in that direction, while Samuel, with the first woman clinging to his back, galloped in circles to distract the pursuers. It worked. 5 of the Comanche warriors changed direction and went after him. Samuel's horse was strong and fast, a magnificent bay he had raised from a colt. But carrying 2 people was different. He could feel his speed decreasing with every stride. The Comanches were getting closer. Samuel could hear the hooves of their horses pounding the hard ground. By the way, if this story is gripping you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave us a comment saying which country you're watching from. We love knowing where our listeners come from. Moving on. The other 2 women had reached the rock formations. They were enormous towers of red stone eroded by centuries of wind and rain, full of crevices and narrow passages. Samuel knew this place. He had hunted here many times. He knew a secret passage. He guided his horse straight toward the rocks, so close that the woman's leg behind him scraped the rough stone. The Comanches shouted in frustration. 2 of them tried to follow him on the same path, but their horses were bigger and didn't fit. They crashed into the rocks and had to back away. Samuel continued forward, slithering between the stone formations like a snake. The passage grew narrower and narrower. Finally, he reached a dead end where the other 2 women were waiting. Huddled against the rock, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope, Samuel jumped off his horse. The woman who had been behind him also dismounted, and the 3 looked at each other. Then they looked at him. They were beautiful, each in her own way. The first one, the one with the turquoise beads, had dark, piercing eyes that seemed to see straight into the soul. The second was shorter, with an athletic build and strong worker's hands. The third was the youngest, with delicate features and a small scar on her cheek. Outside, the Comanche surrounded the rocks looking for another entrance. Samuel knew they would eventually find it, but he also knew something else. "You're in Apache territory now," Samuel whispered, pointing toward the mountains to the north. "If we can get there, you'll be safe." The woman with the turquoise beads nodded. She said something in Apache, and the other 2 became alert. Then she spoke to Samuel in broken but understandable Spanish. "Thank you, Cowboy. I am Anna. They are my sisters." She pointed to the athletic one. "Kayana." She pointed to the youngest Nalan. "Samuel," he replied, tipping his hat. "And you're welcome." We're not safe yet. The Comanche shouts sounded closer. They were finding their way. Samuel thought quickly. His horse couldn't carry all four and run fast enough. They needed another plan. He looked up. The rock formations had ledges and natural crevices. A crazy idea began to form in his mind. "Can you climb?" he asked, pointing upward. The three women followed his gaze and nodded without hesitation. Of course they could. They were Apache. They had grown up in these lands. "Climb up. I'll distract the Comanches. I'll lead them the other way. When they leave, you come down and run north. Don't stop until you reach safe territory." Ona stared at him, her eyes filled with something Samuel couldn't identify at that moment. Respect, perhaps, or something deeper. "Why help?" she asked. "You are not Apache." Samuel shrugged. "Because it's the right thing to do." Without waiting for an answer, he mounted his horse again. The women were already climbing, moving among the rocks with a grace that seemed impossible. Within seconds they had disappeared into the shadows of the upper formations. Samuel took a deep breath, said a silent prayer, and then galloped out of the hiding spot, making as much noise as possible. The Comanches saw him immediately and shouted with excitement. The prey had come out of hiding. What followed was the most dangerous chase of Samuel's life. He galloped through narrow canyons and wide valleys, jumped over dry streams, and dodged giant cacti. The Comanches were on his heels, so close he could hear their breathing. But Samuel was clever. He knew the land. He led them in circles, leaving false tracks, passing over rocky riverbeds where hooves left no marks. Little by little, he led them away from the women, south toward territory they didn't know well. Finally, as the sun began to set, Samuel found what he was looking for. A narrow gorge that led into a maze of canyons. He rode in at full speed, and the Comanches followed. But inside the maze, Samuel knew every turn, every secret exit. In less than 10 minutes, he had lost his pursuers completely. Exhausted, covered in dust and sweat, Samuel stopped his horse in a small hidden cave. His heart was beating like a war drum. His horse panted with white foam on its muzzle, but they were alive. And most importantly, the three Apache women were safe. Samuel didn't know at that moment that what he had done that day would change his life forever. He didn't know that 10 years later those same three women would come looking for him again. He didn't know that he would have to make the most difficult decision of his life. All he knew at that moment, as he rested in that cave with his faithful horse by his side, was that he had done the right thing. And sometimes doing the right thing is all that matters. The wind blew gently over the New Mexico prairies as Samuel Thompson pounded another post into the dry ground of his ranch. The afternoon sun painted the sky in oranges and reds, casting long shadows across the land. Samuel paused for a moment, took off his hat, and wiped the sweat from his forehead. He was 33 years old now, and although his body was still strong, he sometimes felt like he had lived two lives. The first life had been one of adventure and danger. The second, this current life, was one of solitude and hard work. His ranch wasn't big, just a few acres, where he raised horses and grew just enough to survive. The house was small but solid, built with his own hands from wood and stone. He had a stove that worked well, a comfortable bed, and a table where he ate alone every night, always alone. His closest neighbors were the Martinez family, about 2 miles to the east. Don Roberto Martinez, his wife Carmela, their 8-year-old daughter Rosa, and Grandma Lucia lived on a similar ranch. Samuel visited them occasionally, and they him, but he mostly kept to himself. Not because he didn't like company, but because he had learned long ago that it was easier to be alone than to risk losing the people he loved. His parents had died when he was 12. Fever. His younger sister had died a year later. Also fever. Samuel had grown up alone, working on different ranches, learning the cowboy trade, staying on the move to avoid the pain of standing still. But now, at 33, he was tired of moving. He wanted roots, wanted a place to call home. Only that home felt empty. Samuel was hammering the last nail of the day when he heard the gallop. He looked up and saw Rosa Martinez riding toward him at full speed on her pony, her black hair flying behind her like a flag. Samuel's heart skipped a beat. Rosa never galloped like that unless something was wrong. "Don Samuel! Don Samuel!" The girl shouted, tears streaming down her cheeks. Samuel dropped the hammer and ran toward her. Rosa barely managed to stop her pony before shouting, "It's Grandma. The bad men came. They took her." Samuel's world stopped for a second. "What men? Where is your family?" "Some men with bandanas came to the ranch," Rosa sobbed. They wanted our horses. Papa said no. They got angry. They took Grandma and said, if we didn't give them all our horses by tomorrow, they would take her far away and we'd never see her again. Mom and Papa are crying. They don't know what to do. Samuel felt rage boiling in his chest. Bandits, cowards who preyed on defenseless families. He took Rosa's pony reins and helped her down. Rosa, listen to me carefully. Did you see which direction they went? The girl nodded, wiping her tears. Toward the western hills. I saw dust there. How many? 4, I think, or 5. I'm not sure. Samuel nodded. All right, little one, you did very well coming here. Now I want you to go to my house. Go inside and stay there until I return. Understood. But, Don Samuel, what are you going to do? I'm going to bring your grandmother back, Samuel said with a determination that made Rosa stop crying and look at him with hopeful eyes. Samuel saddled his horse faster than ever. He took his rifle, though he hoped he wouldn't have to use it. He took his lasso, his canteen, and some basic provisions. In less than 5 minutes, he was galloping toward the western hills as the sun began to descend on the horizon. The tracks were easy to follow. 5 horses moving without haste. The bandits probably thought no one would follow them until the next morning, when the Martinez family would have to hand over the horses. That gave Samuel an advantage, the element of surprise. He rode for nearly an hour following the tracks through dry valleys and rocky hills. The light was fading quickly. But Samuel knew these lands like the back of his hand. He had hunted here, had explored every corner during his years of solitude. Finally, he saw the faint glow of a campfire in a small canyon ahead. Samuel dismounted and tied his horse to a sturdy bush. He approached on foot, moving silently as the old trackers he had worked with in his youth had taught him. From behind a large rock, he observed the camp. 5 men, just as Rosa had said, sat around the fire, laughing and eating. Off to one side, tied to a small tree, was Grandma Lucia. She was 70 years old, but her gaze was defiant even in this situation. Samuel felt admiration for the old woman. Then he began to plan. He couldn't just go in shooting. It was 5 against 1, and they might hurt the grandmother. He needed to be smart. He needed to use what he did best. Think fast and move faster. He waited until darkness was complete. The bandits were still around the fire, now passing a bottle among themselves. Samuel smiled. That would make things easier. Silently, he slipped toward where the bandits' horses were tied. One by one, he cut the ropes holding them. The horses, nervous at the stranger's presence, began to slowly move away from the camp. Samuel encouraged them with soft pats, sending them in different directions. Then he took a large stone and threw it far to the other side of the canyon. It made a tremendous noise as it crashed against the rocks. The bandits jumped to their feet, grabbing for their weapons. What was that? One shouted. Go check it out, you idiots, ordered the one who seemed to be the leader. 3 of the bandits ran off toward the sound, leaving only 2 by the fire. Samuel moved like a shadow, came up behind the first bandit, and hit him on the head with his rifle butt. The man fell silently. The second bandit turned just in time to see Samuel lunge at him. They wrestled for a moment, but Samuel was stronger and faster. In seconds, the bandit too lay unconscious on the ground. Samuel ran to Grandma Lucia and cut her bonds. It's all right, ma'am. The old woman nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude. I knew you would come, boy. We have to get out of here fast, Samuel whispered. The other 3 will be back soon. But before they could move, they heard shouts. The other bandits had returned and saw their unconscious companions. There, one shouted, pointing directly at Samuel and the grandmother. Samuel took the old woman's hand. Run, ma'am. Run as fast as you can to my horse. It's behind that big rock. I'll hold them off. Go. Grandma Lucia didn't argue. Despite her age, she ran surprisingly fast toward the darkness. Samuel stood his ground, blocking the way. The 3 bandits approached furiously. What followed was a fight Samuel would remember for the rest of his life. Samuel dodged the first punch, then the second. His training as a cowboy had taught him to be quick with his hands. He blocked a blow and answered with one of his own that landed cleanly on the first bandit's jaw. The man fell like a sack of potatoes. The other 2 hesitated for a second, which was enough. Samuel seized the moment, took his lasso from his belt, and threw it with expert precision. He caught the second bandit by the ankles and pulled hard. The man stumbled and fell flat on his face. The third bandit pulled a knife, but Samuel was faster. He kicked the bandit's hand, sending the weapon flying into the darkness. Then he hit him with his rifle butt, leaving him unconscious beside his companions. Breathing heavily, Samuel tied up all 5 bandits with their own ropes. Grandma Lucia watched him from the horse with a mixture of awe and admiration. "You're a good man, Samuel Thompson," she said as they rode back under the moonlight. "Someday you'll find someone who values that noble heart of yours." Samuel didn't reply. At that moment he couldn't imagine those words would be prophetic, nor that the person who would value his heart already knew him and had never forgotten him. When they arrived at the Martinez Ranch, the family ran to embrace the grandmother. There were tears of joy and infinite gratitude. Don Roberto offered money, horses, anything, but Samuel refused it all. "Neighbors help each other," was all he said before riding back to his lonely ranch, unaware that his life was about to change forever. Samuel was repairing the coral fence when he saw the dust on the horizon. 3 riders approached slowly along the dusty road leading to his ranch. He stopped, squinted against the morning sun, and watched curiously. He wasn't expecting visitors. As the riders drew closer, Samuel noticed something peculiar. They didn't ride like cowboys. They rode with the upright posture and elegance of those born on a horse, and their silhouettes were clearly female. His heart began to beat faster for no apparent reason. When they finally came close enough, Samuel felt as if time stood still. It was them. The 3 Apache women he had saved 10 years ago. But they were no longer the frightened young women running for their lives. Now they were adult women, beautiful and confident. Anna, the one who had worn the turquoise beads, now wore a buckskin dress decorated with intricate embroidery. Her black hair fell in perfect braids, adorned with feathers and precious stones. Her eyes were still as piercing as he remembered. But now there was a depth in them that spoke of wisdom and experience. Kiona, the athletic one, dressed more practically in leather pants and a buckskin shirt. She carried a beautifully carved bow on her back, and her posture revealed the strength of a trained warrior. Her gaze was direct and brave. Nala, the youngest, had blossomed into a delicate beauty. She wore a dress decorated with colored beads forming patterns that seemed to tell stories. Her expression was soft but determined. Samuel took off his hat slowly, unable to believe his eyes. The 3 women dismounted gracefully and stopped in front of him. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence filled with memories of unspoken gratitude, of 10 years of distance that suddenly seemed to fade away. Finally, Anna stepped forward. Her Spanish had improved remarkably. "Samuel Thompson, we have been looking for you for a long time. I remember you," was all Samuel could say, still stunned. "How did you find me? An Apache never forgets," said Kiona with a smile, "and never stops looking for the one who saved her life." Nalin added softly, "We asked in many towns, many ranches. Finally, someone spoke of a solitary cowboy who had recently rescued an old woman from bandits. We knew it was you, the man who helps without asking for anything in return." Samuel felt his cheeks warm. "I just did the right thing both times. That's why we're here," said Anna. The 3 women exchanged glances as if communicating without words. Then from their saddlebags they began to kuchu items. Woven blankets with incredible designs, hand-painted ceramic pots, turquoise and silver necklaces, high-quality tanned hides, leather bags full of medicinal herbs. Each gift was more beautiful than the last. "This is too much," Samuel protested. "You can't give me all this. It's not enough." Anna replied firmly, "You saved our lives, returned us to our families. By the traditions of our people, we have a debt that must be paid." Samuel shook his head. "You don't owe me anything, really." "Then don't do it for debt," said Kiona, stepping forward. Her eyes sparkled with something Samuel couldn't decipher. "Do it because we want to." Nalin also approached. "Samuel, for 10 years we have remembered you. The brave cowboy who risked his life for 3 strangers. The good-hearted man who asked for no reward." Anna took Samuel's hand in hers. Her touch was warm and soft. "We have come to tell you something important. Something our hearts have known since that day 10 years ago." Samuel felt the world spin around him. "What thing?" The 3 women looked at each other again. Then, as if they had rehearsed the moment 1,000 times, they spoke almost in unison. But it was Anna who spoke the full words. "We want to marry you, Samuel. Each of us loves you in her own way. Each of us has dreamed of you all these years. We know it's strange for your culture, but in our traditions, a man can choose between several suitors, and we have chosen to present ourselves to you together. Honestly, The silence that followed was so deep that Samuel could hear his own heart beat. He began, but the words stuck in his throat. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion, surprise, and something else he dared not name. Kiona spoke, her voice strong but kind. We know it's a lot to process. We don't expect an answer now, but we wanted you to know the truth. You saved us, Samuel, and in that act you stole our hearts. All three of them. Nalani added softly. You don't have to choose any of us if you don't want to. You don't have to feel obligated. We just wanted you to know that there are 3 women in this world who consider you the most honorable man they have ever known. Samuel looked at the 3 women before him. Each was beautiful, yes, but more than that, each radiated strength, intelligence, and kindness. He could see in their eyes that they spoke sincerely. It wasn't a game or a cultural obligation. It was real. I live alone, Samuel said finally, his voice hoarse. For many years I've grown accustomed to solitude, to not depending on anyone, to not letting anyone depend on me, because everyone I've loved I've lost. Anna squeezed his hand. Solitude is safe, but it's not life. Love is risk. But it's the only thing that makes waking up each morning worthwhile. Besides, said Kiona with a mischievous smile, you're not as used to solitude as you think. You saved Grandma Lucia a week ago. A true loner wouldn't have risked his life for an old woman. Samuel couldn't help but smile at that. She was right. He said suddenly, surprising himself. At least for a few days. Let me get to know you. Truly. Not as the man who saved you 10 years ago, but as the man I am now. And you let me know you as the women you are today, not as the frightened young women back then. The 3 women smiled, and in those smiles Samuel saw hope, joy, and some relief. We will stay. Anna agreed. But you should know something else, Samuel. Eventually you will have to choose only one of us. Our traditions allow a woman to court a man, but marriage is between 2 people. We know and accept that. And whoever is not chosen will still be your friend and sister forever. I don't want to hurt anyone, Samuel said honestly. Honesty never hurts as much as a lie, Nolan replied. Just be yourself. The rest will happen as it should. The days passed like a strange and wonderful dream for Samuel. The 3 women had settled into his ranch, each showing her unique skills in ways that constantly amazed him. Anna spent her mornings in the small garden behind the house, identifying wild herbs and planting medicinal seeds she had brought from her tribe. Her hands seemed to have magic when they touched the earth. She taught Samuel about plants that cured headaches, wounds, and fevers. When they talked, their conversations were deep and peaceful about life, nature, and the meaning of simple things. Kiona woke before dawn to train Samuel's horses. She had a natural gift with animals. The wildest colts calmed under her touch. She showed Samuel techniques he had never seen, ways of communicating with horses that went beyond simple commands. She was direct, honest, and her laugh was like the free wind of the mountains. Nolan transformed the inside of Samuel's house. She hung curtains she had woven herself, creating patterns of light and shadow that made the rooms feel larger and cozier. In the afternoon, she sat by the window and created art with beads and leather while telling him ancient stories of her people. Her voice was musical, and Samuel found himself working more slowly just to hear her better. But Samuel knew he would have to make a decision, and that decision terrified him. On the evening of the 5th day, Samuel was in the stable when he noticed something strange. The sky to the west had turned a sickly yellow. The horses were restless, pawing the ground and neighing nervously. Samuel had lived long enough in these lands to know what it meant, a sandstorm, and it would be big. He ran to the house. We have to prepare. A storm is coming. The 3 women wasted no time on useless questions. Anna began securing everything outside. Kiona led all the horses into the big barn and closed the doors tightly. Nolan closed all the windows and doors of the house, sealing the cracks with damp cloths. Samuel climbed onto the roof to secure loose shingles when he saw something that made his blood freeze. In the distance, on the road to the Martinez ranch, he saw a small figure. It was Rosa riding her pony, galloping desperately toward his house, trying to make it before the storm caught her, but she wouldn't. The wall of sand was approaching too fast, a roaring mass of dust and wind that could disorient anyone in seconds. A small child wouldn't stand a chance. Samuel didn't think twice. He jumped off the roof, ran to the stable, and mounted his fastest horse. Kiona saw him and understood immediately. I'm coming with you, she shouted, jumping onto another horse. It's too dangerous. Two eyes see better than one in a sandstorm. Kiona replied firmly, don't argue. Let's go. There was no time to argue. Samuel spurred his horse and rode out with Kiona beside him. The wind was already beginning to blow hard, kicking up small swirls of dust. They had minutes, maybe less. They galloped toward where he had seen Rosa. Visibility worsened quickly. Sand began to sting their skin like tiny needles. Samuel covered his mouth and nose with his bandana and shouted Rosa's name again and again. There, Kiona shouted, pointing to the right. Samuel saw Rosa's pony frightened, running in circles, but Rosa wasn't on it. She had fallen. Samuel's heart lurched. He spurred his horse harder as the wall of sand approached like a roaring monster. Finally, he saw Rosa lying on the ground, clinging to a bush as the wind tried to drag her away. Samuel jumped off his horse and ran to her. He picked her up in his arms just as the storm hit them with full fury. The world turned brown. He couldn't see beyond his own hand. The roar of the wind was deafening. Kiona appeared beside him like a ghost in the storm. She had caught Rosa's pony and was holding it tightly. She shouted something, but Samuel couldn't hear her over the wind. She pointed downward and Samuel understood. There was a natural dip in the ground. A small hollow that would offer some protection. They crawled toward it, fighting against the wind that tried to rip them from the ground. Samuel held Rosa against his chest, protecting her from the flying sand. Kiona huddled beside them, using her body to create an additional barrier. The three horses huddled close, instinctively seeking protection in numbers. The storm raged around them like a living beast. Samuel could feel sand getting everywhere in his eyes, his ears, his mouth, despite the bandana. Rosa trembled in his arms, crying. He held her tighter. You're safe, he shouted in her ear. I won't let you go. He didn't know how much time passed. It could have been minutes or hours. Time lost meaning in that hell of sand and wind. All that existed was the constant effort to breathe, to keep his eyes shut, to not let go of Rosa. At some point, Samuel felt Kiona's hand find his. She squeezed it tightly, and that simple gesture gave him strength. He wasn't alone in this. Someone else was fighting beside him. Finally, slowly, the roar began to diminish. The wind lost its fury. The sand stopped flying so violently. Samuel dared to open his eyes a crack. The storm was passing. When it finally ended, the three rose slowly, completely covered in brown dust. They looked like sand statues. Rosa coughed and cried, but was unharmed. The horses shook their heads, sending clouds of dust into the air. Samuel looked at Kiona. She looked back, and in that moment, without words, something passed between them. An understanding, a connection forged in shared danger. But then Samuel thought of Anna and Nolan waiting at the ranch, probably frantic with worry. He thought of how Anna had held his hand days ago. He thought of Nolan's musical laugh, and his heart felt split in three directions. They rode slowly back to the ranch. Rosa rode with Samuel still clinging to him. When they arrived, Anna and Nolan ran toward them. There were tears in Anna's eyes as she helped Rosa down from the horse. I thought I'd lost you, she whispered. Nolan hugged Kiona. Thank you for taking care of him. That night, after Rosa was returned safely to her grateful parents, the four sat around the table in silence. The storm had cleared the air, but it had left something unresolved floating among them. Samuel knew the time had come. He couldn't keep putting off the decision. I need to talk to you, he said finally. All three of you. About what I feel, about what I must do. The three women nodded, their faces serious but understanding. The most difficult conversation of Samuel's life was about to begin. The fire in the fireplace crackled softly, filling the small room with golden light that danced on the walls. Samuel stood by the window, looking at the stars shining with unusual clarity after the sandstorm. The three women sat waiting patiently. The silence was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Samuel took a deep breath and turned to face them. For my entire adult life, he began, his voice rough with emotion. I have protected myself. I built walls around my heart because losing my family as a child taught me that love hurts, that trusting someone is risking unbearable pain. Ona watched him with those deep, understanding eyes. Kiana had her hands clasped on the table, her posture alert but relaxed. Nolan fidgeted with a bead on her necklace, listening attentively. But you three came into my life like a storm, Samuel continued. And you've shown me that I've been living only half a life. That fear has stolen years of happiness from me. He approached the table and sat down in front of them. His eyes moved from one face to another, memorizing every detail. "Kiana," he said, turning to her first. The woman lifted her chin, her brave eyes meeting his. "You are like the free wind of the mountains, strong, independent, brave. Today, you saved my life out there in that storm. Your spirit is so big that no ranch, no house, no man could contain it." Kiana opened her mouth to speak, but Samuel raised a gentle hand. "Let me finish, please. You are magnificent, Kiana, but I know you well enough now to know that your heart belongs to open spaces, adventure, the freedom to gallop without a fixed destination. If you stay here with me, eventually you would feel caged, and I love you too much to do that." Kiana's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded slowly. "You're right," she whispered, "and I respect you more for seeing it. You'll always be my brother Samuel, the bravest man I know." Samuel felt his own chest tighten, but he turned to Nolan. The young woman looked at him with soft, shining eyes. "Nolan, you are like the art you create. Delicate, beautiful, full of deep meaning. Your stories have filled this house with magic. Your laughter has made these days the happiest I've had in years." Nolan smiled sadly, as if she already knew what was coming. "But you are a creative spirit." Samuel continued. "You need to be surrounded by beauty, music, other artistic souls who can appreciate your talent. I am a simple man, Nolan. My hands are made for working the land and taming horses, not for understanding the subtleties of the art you create. You deserve someone who can walk with you in that world of creativity." Nolan let out a small sigh, but nodded. "I know. In my heart, I know. But thank you for these wonderful days, Samuel. I will never forget them." Finally, Samuel turned to Anna. She had been watching him the whole time, and in her eyes was something that made Samuel's heart beat faster. "Anna," he said, and his voice broke slightly. He cleared his throat and continued. "From the moment you arrived, I felt something different. It's not the wild excitement of adventure, not the fascination of art and beauty. It's something deeper, quieter." He stood and walked toward her. Anna rose to meet him, her eyes never leaving his. "When I work in the field and see you tending your garden, I feel peace. When we talk at night about simple things, I feel like I've finally come home. In the storm, when I thought I might not return, it was your face I saw in my mind, your voice I heard calling me back." He took Anna's hands in his. They were strong hands but soft. Hands that healed and created life. "You understand me without my having to explain. You see my silences and don't try to fill them with unnecessary words. You accept my past without judgment. And when you look at me, I see a future I never dared to imagine." Tears flowed freely down Anna's cheeks. "I love you, Anna," Samuel whispered, not in the dramatic way of stories, but in the real deep way that grows day by day, like a tree that slowly sinks its roots, but becomes unshakable over time. "Will you marry me?" Anna sobbed and threw herself into his arms. "Yes, 1,000 times yes. I have loved you since